This is Arushi Gautam, Manager Events at IFKI. I am pleased to welcome you all for today's session on detaxing the COVID impact for expatriates in India. We feel this is a very timely subject as this pandemic has led to an unscheduled exit and entry of French nationals in India, leading to changes in functioning of businesses and as well as impacting the individual tax status. We are pleased to partner with ASA and Associates for today's session us and address the various complex tax situations that have emerged lately. Our speaker today is Mr. Sunil Arora, who leads the taxation function at ASA Associates in Delhi. I'll take a minute here in introducing Sunil to all of you. Sunil is an expert in international taxation. He advises companies on operation strategy in India, structuring issues, tax planning avenues, expatriate taxation, and devising transfer pricing policies, along with defending them before the tax authorities. Sunil has successfully represented his clients in contract negotiations as well as the dispute resolution panel. Sunil, we are very happy to have you with us today. I would now like to hand over to you for your presentation. Over to you and welcome.
Thank you, Arushi. Am I loud and clear, Arushi? Do you hear me, Arushi?
Yes, we can hear you, Sunil.
Very well. So thank you very much, Arushi, first of all, for thinking about this session. And I think it's very timely. I fully agree with you. We have all seen what COVID has done to all of us, and the way the world has reacted to COVID. Why only talk about India? It has impacted, businesses. You could talk about your supplies. You talk about your demand. You talk about employment. I mean, you look at any economic indicator, you have a story to tell. Now, in the backdrop of the way we have been dealing with this entire situation, we never realized that it's been 6 months, and 6 months obviously has a lot of significance attached to it. It's already been 6 months. the employers have been impacted. The employees have been impacted. There have been pay cuts. There have been furloughs. You talk about work from home, which is a new norm. People have had to be evacuated on a very short notice. There has been a very deep impact in the way we look at things. We don't realize it now. I'm sure after 1 year, when we do a sort of a recollection and try to see how COVID has impacted us, there will be a lot of stories to tell. So what we thought perhaps we could do today is that since it's been 6 months since the world has almost learned how to deal with the ongoing situation, and as a result, companies are wanting to send back their people, and therefore it's very timely to understand what are the footprints this COVID scenario has left on this entire situation. So we thought, let's try and look at issues that are very specific to expats, to French expats. I'm going to be referring to some tax provisions relating to expats. So we thought maybe we could cover those up. And related to the French expats, what are the immediate issues? I'm not going to go deeper into this particular area, but what are the immediate issues that the corporates are looking at when they talk about expats stuck in India, or who had to exit India, or who had to change their complete way of working only due to COVID? Just give me the next slide, Kim. The one after that, please. So how do I plan to take this further? First of all, let's do a reality check. Let's try and see where are we stuck. What are the pain points? And why are we doing this particular discussion? What leads to the issues that we are going to discuss? And once we have a hang on that, we are going to highlight and sort of understand, first of all, issues of personal tax. Where does it hit the most? Is it hitting most on the personal tax side? Is it the corporate tax side? We are going to look at both the sides of the coin. Now, the the attempt really is to highlight issues. These are very specific issues. Every corporate might have a different arrangement with their employees. Every corporate might have a different HR policy to follow. In effect, it leads to, let's say, people either getting stuck in India or people leaving India or corporates dealing with a specific situation. But, unless you understand every element, every nut and bolt of an arrangement, it's very difficult to comment and give you a final answer. But the attempt here will be to give you an outline of how we perceive these issues. Now, once we have done that, we are going to leave you with some issues to ponder, some experience-based advice, the way we have been seeing last 6 months, what has helped, what has not helped, just 4 or 5 issues so that you have a good grip on the whole subject. Next slide, please. Now, what we have done is we have created 2 or 3 scenarios. We have said that there is a scenario where the expats had to exit from India in an untimely fashion. The news suddenly came that you have to leave India. What are the consequences when that happened? What it led to? And what are the issues then emerged from this particular decision? So what happened? What was the first thing that happened? The first thing that happened was there was no changes to your arrangements, right? So you were in India, you are an expat, you are in India, you are employed by an Indian company, you may be paid a split salary in India and in France. Everything remains the same. It's just that your place of rendering services has moved from India to another location. It could be France, it could be the other country that you are resident of, anywhere. Right? That's one. Number 2, your benefits, right? Your benefits stay intact. For example, you were given a house, you were given a car, you were given a club membership by the company. Now, all of them are retained. The reason they are retained, could be primarily they were paid in advance. There are lock-in periods. And the fact is, your stuff could be inside the house that you were staying into and you had to leave overnight. The end of the day, the property, the benefits, they're at your disposal. Right? That's the situation. Number 3, you are looking at possibly looking at a situation where just before you moved your location, your base from India to another country, your employment was about to get concluded, or because of this complete shift, your organization decided to terminate your employment. For various reasons, they wanted you to move somewhere else, or security concerns, health concerns, there could be multiple issues. Then one issue, which is connected issue, is that there is an issue about tax clearances, and I will speak more about it. There could be various situations where you are required to obtain a tax clearance as an individual before you leave India. Now, what happened to those situations? If you were obliged to seek a tax clearance certificate prior to your departure from India, and you did not seek it, what happens then? So based on this, we thought there could be multiple issues coming up. Just give me the next slide, Kim. So these are the issues we thought could become relevant. And I'm strictly speaking from the expat side. So the first and the foremost question is, I have not been rendering services in India during the period of absence. Simple, straight, vanilla question, right? I was outside India, and I have heard that you are only taxed in India if you render services in India. This is what my tax advisors have told me. So this period, I was not working in India, and I was working in France. Am I still taxable in India in respect of the salary that is paid to me by the Indian employer? Mark these words. I'm talking about the Indian employer. You could have a split salary arrangement. You could get multiple salaries. Here, I'm only discussing the salary that you receive from an Indian employer. Now, when you talk about the rules of tax are very, very clear. The preamble is that you either receive the money or you source the money. Whatever happens in a particular country, that country has the right to tax you. Simple case. If your Indian employer continues to pay salary to you, or he continues to bear a particular salary for you, this is a salary that will be taxed in your hands. There is absolutely no getting away from this discussion. Similar question, but in context of the benefits. You have an accommodation, company leased accommodation, a 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom house from the company. You could have a car at your disposal with chauffeur. You could have a club membership. You could have company paying for your children's education, any sort of benefits. Now, these benefits, the question is, these benefits are retained for me during the period of absence. I'm away, but the benefits remain. I told you what could be the possible reasons. Now, I did not actually utilize these benefits. The question is, are these still taxable in my hand? Now, the issue is, as I sort of gave an indication initially, these are the assets, these are the facilities that were bought or acquired or rented for me, right? Whether I can use it or not is irrelevant. Are they available for me? Do I have a complete right of disposal to me? I'm not staying there. Can I ask one of my relatives, one of my friends to go stay in that occupation, to use that car, subject to company regulations, obviously, but this is at my disposal, right? So the fact is that given the fact that I'm in a position to use these benefits, whether or not I actually utilize these benefits, it is clearly a benefit that is taxable in my hands. Now, there's a very old Supreme Court judgment in India, in the case of L.W. Russell, which very clearly said that as long as the benefits vest into you, and this vesting is a very critical term, and vesting really means that they should be available to you. You should be able to use it. Whether you use it or not is, not a question that we are discussing. So, question number one, question number two, both answered in affirmative. I'm going to be taxed on my Indian salary. We are going to talk about the French salary separately. I'm going to be taxed on the Indian benefits that are given or that are available to me in India. Third issue, I have already exited from India. I took an evacuation flight. Now let's talk about the income tax clearance certificate. Is there still a requirement to obtain the tax clearance certificate? Post departure, the reason we emphasize on the word post departure is that this certificate is required pre departure, right? The law really says there's a section 230. So the tax code 230 very clearly says that if you are a person not domiciled in India, and if you come to India for commercial purposes, you are supposed to obtain a tax clearance. It's an NOC from the income tax office here in India, from a jurisdictional tax officer, before you depart India. Now, obviously, you could not have known that by the time this entire thing ends, your employment could have been terminated, or you always obviously thought this was a temporary movement. So either you did not care to obtain this ITCC, or you did not have time to obtain the ITCC. So what do you do post departure? Now, again, there is no law guiding this particular issue, and we can only come by experience. Now, with experience, we have learned that most of the jurisdictions in India, we have tried this in New Delhi, we have tried this in Mumbai, in Bangalore. Jurisdictions are working at low capacity, the tax offices, but they are entertaining requests to obtain a clearance certificate post departure. Now, one could ask a question, what's the use of obtaining this certificate post departure? First of all, it was always your onus to seek this kind of a certificate if you were departing India for good, right? So you did not do that just in order to complete your compliances, fulfill your compliances. It should have been a mandatory requirement. Secondly, we have seen cases where the next time when you enter India, and that's where the next question, is this going to impact my re-entry into India at a future time? Now, we have seen cases where people who went out of India without caring for the income tax clearance certificate, they often had difficulties when the visa officer asked about the first employment. And the immediate next question was, where is the tax clearance certificate that you have obtained in India then, right? Now, they're not trying to target anything. They're only trying to make sure that the database is completed and there is no occasion which could possibly amount to tax evasion. This is not an allegation. It's just a checking mechanism. That's all. Next slide, please, Kim. So again, a question which I said that we're going to be talking about the French salary. So typical case, I'm a French national and I'm a fiscal tax resident there. I'm a tax resident in France for fiscal purposes, right? Now, at some point, because of COVID, I ended up staying for less than 6 months in India during fiscal year 2021. Indian fiscal year, for those who don't know, starts from April 1st and goes up to March 31st. Now, obviously, we are doing this session. The reason we said this session is very timely because we've already been through 6 months. So April to September, I was not in India. I've spent less than 6 months in India. I am still employed by an Indian company, right? And I receive salary from Indian sub company, and I receive a salary from France. We've already discussed whether the Indian component of my salary is taxed in India or not. Obviously, it is taxed. I've already given you some reasons. What is the rule of tax says? Now, the issue is my French salary taxable in India or not? And in that respect, are there any benefits that I can avail under the Indo-French tax treaty to safeguard or to examine whether my French salary is taxable in India or not? Now, I've already told you the golden rule. The golden rule is if the salary is paid out of India, it has to be taxed in India. Now, this salary we're talking about has not been paid out of India. This salary has been paid from France. Now, there is an Article 16, and I'm specifically referring to Article 16.2 of the Indo-French Tax Treaty. Now, this talks about an exceptional case where the employee ends up spending less than 6 months in India. And there are some conditions attached to it. And if these three conditions are satisfied simultaneously, there is a good case for you to claim that this salary is not taxable in India. There could be connected issues. I'm not discussing the connected issues. I'll touch upon one or two, but not all of them. But these could be complex corporate issues. But from a French national perspective, where do I stand? So the conditions are, one is I have to be staying in India for less than 182 days in a financial year. Now, I have not stayed in India for, I've met that condition. I've stayed for less than 182 days. The second condition is this salary should not be paid to me by an Indian company. The French company is paying the salary. They are not paying the salary to me. Neither should it be charged to the Indian company in any manner. Now, that's something which you will have to examine. And how do you examine? I will take a reference to that. The third issue is this salary should not also be charged to a permanent establishment of the French company which is paying this salary to me. So three conditions. One is stay in India less than 182 days. Second condition is salary not paid by an Indian company or not charged to an Indian company. Third condition is it should not be charged to a permanent establishment of the French employer in India. Now, unless I fulfill all the three conditions, I cannot get the benefit under the tax treaty, right? And if I fulfill all the three conditions, there is a potential case. This is a good case for you to examine or to seek refuge under this condition, Article 16 of the tax treaty, which means you could say that the French salary is not taxable in India, and it remains taxable in France. And that's where you are also looking at. There is also a need to look at the relevant rules in France. What happens in France? Now, we are no experts on the French side, but there is bound to be a difference in the way France and India looks at this particular issue, is because French is a member of the OECD nations. India is not. And France is bound by, more or less bound by, the guidance which the OECD issues. And OECD has issues and guidance that saying that any COVID-related forced stays in France will not lead to a residence situation or not lead to a permanent establishment situation in France, right? So when one reads these provisions, now India has no such corresponding provision. When one reads these situations, one has to take both the situations into account. And the way you consult your Indian tax advisors, there is a need to consult the French tax advisor too, so that you avoid any possibility of either no taxation or a double taxation. We are talking about something very, very critical. Now, I mentioned something about charging costs to India. One document which could be particularly important in the scenario could be the secondment agreement. Now, it is likely that, if you belong to a larger MNC, it is likely that you have a secondment agreement between the group entities. And typically, this agreement says that the French employer says that I'm going to give my employees to you on a no obligation basis. You use them as per your whims and fancies. You use it as per your own internal systems, which means you are the boss now. Indian company is the boss now. Now, in this agreement, there are also protocols dealing with whether the cost relating to this particular aspect should be charged to the Indian company or not, if there's any cost paid by the French company. You have to be very cognizant of that fact. Other issues which could also sort of deal or have an implication on this particular situation is that what is the individual's residential status in India? Is he a non-resident? Is he a not ordinary resident? Is he a resident and an ordinary resident in India? If it is ordinary resident, obviously the situation could completely change. The next one is similar to what we discussed earlier. So maybe we can go to the next slide. Okay, so you were forced to stay in India. Again, what are the situations that you're dealing with? Now you are in India, but your employment may get shifted overseas. So you were an employee of a group company in India. Suddenly, you were due for a change, and suddenly, because of COVID, you are stuck in India. But your employment, it hasn't stopped. You are still you are employed by another entity overseas, and because of that, your salary also is paid by an overseas entity. And given that you are in India, and if you have spent significant time in India, this also has an implication, or this could have an implication of changing your tax residential status significantly. And one thing which must happen if you are at a senior position is that today is a world of virtual communication. So what essentially happens is that you are in a connected world. You keep connected with your management all across the world and end up making key decisions in India. All of this could have implications. Next slide, please. So what are the sort of situations that we're dealing with? My employment, let's say, typical case, my employment has shifted to an employer in France since April 2020. I am paid in France. But I've worked from India since then. I've been working from home. This could be various issues. My work does not relate to India. Now, am I taxable in India in respect of salary earned during this period? Again, I'll just clarify the situation for you. I have no relationship with India other than the fact that I am staying in India, or I have to stay in India. The beneficiary of my services, I'm an employee of a foreign company. The beneficiary of my services is a foreign enterprise. And obviously, I'm unable to move due to the pandemic. Now, what do we do? This is a typical case, and there could be many arguments to say whether this salary should be taxed in India or not. If you're a foreign resident, salary not paid, foreign national salary not paid in India, salary paid by a foreign company, the only way the salary could be taxed in India if it is established that the services for which you get this salary are being rendered in India. Now, what amounts to services being rendered in India? Is it only your stay which defines whether services are rendered in India? Do you have to establish a nexus between an Indian customer and the work that you're doing? Will that establish a nexus in India? I think, given the way Indian law speaks, Indian law is very literal in its interpretation. It very clearly says that we are only going to look at your stay in India. Now, your stay could be on account of holidays, medical, family weddings. It could be anything. Similarly, you are in India because of the pandemic, but there were evacuation flights. You could have gone out of India. So you are not bound to be staying in India. So one could take multiple arguments. Given that eventually you are staying in India, I can take an argument that the services that you render for the foreign company are rendered in India, and therefore there could be a case or an argument to tax you in India for this salary. I know it sounds bizarre, but this is something which is possible. Now, in this, uh, imagine a case where there were no evacuation flights. Imagine a case where you were stuck in India. What would you do then? Now, that is a case which could have amounted to something called impossibility of performance. There's a very famous case in the Indian judiciary, the case of Mr. Suresh Nanda. Now, this is a 5-6-year-old judgment, maybe or more, maybe even before that. Now, what had happened to him was that he was a non-resident Indian. He came to India. He got into trouble with the CBI. CBI impounded his passport, and because his passport got impounded, he had to stay in India for more than 182 days, and he became a resident. Now, when his tax case came up, the tax officer said, "We don't care about anything. End of the day, you were in India. We don't care why." Obviously, the matter went to the tribunal. The matter went to the High Court, and this all happened in Delhi, New Delhi. The court very clearly said that this was a situation where the taxpayer was bound by a situation called uh, impossibility of performance. So I was not in a situation to go out of India, and therefore, my residential status cannot change because of the situation. So the court gave him benefit. So the court helped him retain his non-resident status in India because it excluded the period the passport was impounded and because of the CBI case. So that was a separate issue. Today the world is different. Today there is an air bubble. You could have traveled to India, but you chose to stay in India for health reasons, very valid health reasons. Now this is good for you. Is it good for the Indian government or not? This is something which is questionable. So to me, this is a gray area. You must, if this is a situation that you're dealing with, you must try and give it a thought. Now, second issue is very common. You were given some money to set up a home office. Is it taxable in your hands? To the extent you spend this money, this is not taxable in your hands. Obviously, you have to maintain invoices, you have to give evidences, but otherwise, no. The third issue is, you know, you are working with a group. Now, you've left the Indian company, but you've been retained by the foreign company. Now, because of COVID, these agreements could not be changed. You wanted to stay in India, but you have continued the arrangement from the earlier employment. Is it taxable in your hands or not? Yes, it is taxable in your hands. There's no question about it. This is not exactly a benefit, but this amounts to profit in lieu of salaries, right? You are getting this employment end of the day due to the employment that you exercise with the foreign company. Next slide, please. Now, again, you have qualified as an ordinary resident because you've stayed in India for more than a particular threshold. What happens then? Obviously, if you are an ordinary resident in India, this is a matter of concern because number one, you're going to be taxed in India on your global income. Now, whether all of it is taxed in India or not is a question that you only examine by looking into the tax treaties, but at least all of it is reportable to India, right? Which means that your tax returns will have the entire declaration of what you have earned all over the world, your interest, your dividends outside the India, your rental incomes, so on and so forth, anything and everything. Most important, all your sources of income, all the arrangements, financial arrangements that you have, you could have stocks, you could have shares, you could have debentures, you could be a trustee, you could be a signatory in a bank account, anything and everything must be disclosed to the Indian tax authorities. And obviously, the moment you do that, you are subjected to higher scrutiny, right? And if you have not been doing this in the past for valid reasons or invalid reasons, you are subjected to even higher scrutiny, and that could lead to prosecution, penalties, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. This is a very generic issue. Next slide, Kim. Okay, this is one, please. Don't move it. Sorry, just go back. So let's look at the employer's perspective. I'm going to push it a bit now. You have employees stuck in India, right? And these employees who are stuck in India are going to take key decisions in India. And obviously, the moment you do all of this, the moment you have employees in India, there is going to be an enhanced cost of managing Indian projects. How does all of this create issues or concern areas on tax for the employer entity. Next slide, please. Now we are looking at, take a very simple case. We're talking about a case of a key decision maker, let's say a managing director or deputy managing director or a country manager of a French company who's stuck in India. Now he's participating in all board meetings via video conferencing, and because he is a person of authority, he's issuing critical directions relating to the global business and possibly Indian business via video conferencing, phone, but during the time he's based in India. Now, does this impact? We have spoken about how this will not impact the decision-making part, not impact the individual tax obligations, but does this has an impact on the French companies' tax obligations in India? Most certainly, yes. There are two issues that we are looking at. First issue we are looking at is something called an issue of residency. Now, this person is a representative of a foreign company, and if he is a key decision maker, and if he takes these decisions from India in India, there is a risk of this foreign company setting up what we call as a residency under the POEM rules, place of effective management. And the moment that happens, there is a potential of foreign companies' profits getting taxed into India. And I'm not even mentioning the sort of compliances that you will have to meet. These are all very critical issues. Again, I will mention what OECD has done. OECD has very clearly guided its member countries that if a situation like this arises in their country, the person will not lead to a POEM situation for the company of another country. India has not done that till yet. Unless India gives out these clarifications, any sort of guidance, there is a risk, and it's a very, very high risk. So if you are in that position, please sensitize your employers of this particular issue. The other issue is, am I creating a PE in India because of my presence in India for a substantial time? Now, there are two dimensions to look at it. One dimension is I am the Indo-French tax treaty. Now, when you talk about PE, friends, it's very important to understand PE has to be seen, has to be related with the particular function. The first function of the PE, which we refer to when we talk about people getting deputed to other countries, is something what we know as a service PE. Now, this is a case which otherwise could have attracted a service PE. Fortunately, under the Indo-French tax treaty, there is no clause of, it does not recognize a service PE situation. So there is no service PE situation. But given that the person is going to utilize a specific place of business in India, he could be in a hotel, he could be in a guest house, he could be in the office of your subsidiary, he could be on a client location, he could be anywhere, right? Will that location amount to a fixed place subsidiary for the foreign company in India or not? And the answer is highly likely. It is very, very likely that this could happen. So that is something that we could examine separately. Again, if India decides to exempt you from these repercussions, it's a clean slate for you. But until that happens, it's not going to be safe. One other issue which is connected to the permanent establishment part is connected to supervisors. Now, this is specifically relevant for those who are into projects, companies that run projects, multiple projects in India, typically EPC projects. Now, you are on a construction site in India, in a remote village. Obviously, you had the news about COVID, but obviously due to limited travel arrangements, you could not travel to the airports. You are stuck, and now there are different problems. What happens eventually? You are stuck. You will obviously give rise to a PE, or could give rise to a PE. But more importantly, your project duration has suddenly gone up from 4 months to 11 months. Now, why I say 4 and why 11 is because up to 6 months of project duration, you do not set up a supervisory PE in India up to 6 months of duration. The moment this goes beyond 6 months, there is a risk of supervisory PE. Now, what happens in this case? Now, Indian courts in the past have held, the law is not clear about it. The Indian courts in the past have held that a temporary delay in the project must be counted as a part of the project. So under normal circumstances, if these 4 months for labor issues, for construction issues could have resulted into 7 months, no problem. The new duration is 7 months and you are looking at a PE situation. This is a COVID situation, exceptional situation. 4 months have become 11 months. Is it still a supervisory PE or not? Literally speaking, yes. But if India deals with the way we imagined India would, which means OECD clarifications could come up, then obviously you have a window to look at a clean slate. There may not be any situation for permanent establishment. Now, the next one is a more generic issue. Maybe we can skip it for the interest of time. Give me the next slide, Kip. Now, this is a critical one. Now, there are people that have gone back to the headquarters, right? And these are the same people who were seconded by the foreign company to the Indian subsidiary. They were in India until COVID happened, and suddenly they are back to France. They are the key decision makers. So they are going to call the shots while they are sitting in the headquarters or any other group company or any other office where they have their house. They are going to be calling shots from that location, right? Now, when they are sitting there, we have seen it happening quite often that since you're sitting at that location, you also are given some local responsibility. Now, if you are an employee of that foreign company, there is no problem. You are bound to take care of India responsibilities. You are bound to take care of local responsibilities. But in this case, you are still an Indian employee, right? You are seconded to India for all practical purposes. You transfer the economic rights in the employment, the legal rights in the employment to the Indian entity, right? They have suddenly come back and they've taken a bigger role. Now, if they are only handling the Indian part, there is no problem. The issue is if they are handling any part of the India business, which was earlier handled by the head office, if they are participating in any deal conclusions sitting in France relating to India business, this is a problem because you don't realize when you change your hats, you are an Indian employee on the Indian payroll. Suddenly you are thrown up a question because you represent India. Suddenly you're thrown a question about pricing for concluding an Indian contract. This was actually a role which was earlier performed by the business team sitting in France. Now you're there. And so your roles could easily mix up, right? And this will happen not by choice, this will happen by default. Now, if a situation like this comes up, we are looking at a tough issue of permanent establishment. The corporate will have to be answerable whether these expats who are Indian employees, did they participate in any deal-making process or any business conclusion process while they were sitting in France relating to India or not? This is a critical, very, very critical issue. Now, one, which is the last one, again, looks like a small issue, but again, it's a very critical issue, is that, we all have generally the larger corporates, they have a secondment agreement, and we mentioned about it in the beginning. Now, suddenly COVID happened, and the global HR issued guidelines that everybody should evacuate. You evacuated from India, evacuated your people from India. These are all expats. Nobody paid attention whether this was a guidance from the global or this was a guidance from the Indian HR. Now, if we don't look into this issue, which means that we don't understand the intricacies of a secondment arrangement. Why? When you talk about a secondment arrangement, you are actually talking about a scenario where you are bound and only bound by the Indian company, right? Suddenly you heard from the global HR, you have to evacuate without paying heed to what the Indian HR has said. You followed instructions given by the global HR. Now, now, in reality, that would have happened, but on papers, uh, purely from a technical perspective, this should not have happened. What should have happened ideally is that the global should have issued instructions to the local HR. The local HR should have then issued instructions to its employees, and its employees include the seconded employees to India. Unless that has happened, uh, you are being bound by the instructions given by the headquarters, which then challenges the basic sanctity of your secondment agreement. And if that happens, you are looking at a big, big permanent establishment issue for the corporate. So that is a very clear scenario, because we understand the sanctity of a secondment agreement. Unless that is maintained, we are looking at a tough scenario. I think that brings me to the last couple of points and more experience-based advice. Next slide, please. Now, we have understood most of the issues. These are specific issues we discussed about how the personnel have to think, how the companies have to think. These are just some pointers, just some miscellaneous takeaways. One is an element of tax planning, and the others are just some cautionary points for you to exercise. And this is purely experience-based. Now, most of the companies in this scenario are making losses, right? And I'm talking about Indian companies, Indian subsidiary companies, and I'm talking about the global companies. Let's talk about the French head office. They are also likely to make a loss this year. Now, is there a provision under the Indian Income Tax Act which, keeping in mind that the companies are going to make losses, is there an avenue of tax planning which will help you optimize the cost of tax liability that you pay for expatriates? Now, typically in an expat arrangement, most, or let's say, I would say almost 90 to 100%, 90 to 95% of your taxes are borne by the employer. And I'm referring to the grossing up. I'm referring to the grossing up portion. Now, there is a provision in the Indian Income Tax Act which says, and it's a tax code 1010CC. It's a very critical tax code, so you must remember it. Now, the provision says that the tax amount on non-monetary benefits, and which are the non-monetary benefits? The biggest one is accommodation. This is where you pay the maximum in terms to maintain an employee in India. Fee for children's school education, that could be substantial, running into more than 100,000. If you have 2 or 3 children going to American school or French schools, easily consumes about $100,000 US in India. Now, these are major expenses and these are non-monetary benefits. Now, the law says that the tax amount on these non-monetary benefits should not be grossed up in the hands of the expat if you disallow, if you do not claim the same cost in the hands of the corporate. So when the corporate pays your tax, it claims this tax as a deductible expense. The law says this portion of tax, if it is claimed exempt in the hands of the individual and taxed in the hands of corporate, this is acceptable. Now, in today's situation, corporates are making losses, right? When the corporates are making losses, which means even if they have to pay tax on this amount, this only means that their losses will reduce marginally. Whereas for expats, it's a direct saving of personal tax. And when you say it's a saving for expat, it's a cash flow saving to the group, because the group, end of the day, was going to pay tax for this expat. This is a very, very useful tool. From our experience, we have saved anything from between 100,000 to 500,000 of tax per year for expats. And we have experimented, we have used this provision in almost all the loss-making cases, even in previous years. Today is a COVID year, and obviously this will become more prevalent. Do not lose cognizance of this particular section. Now, the moment your expats move out of India, they will obviously, there will be a tendency to not take any tax-related communication from India seriously. Today, the Indian government communicates via e-channel, right? Anything and everything that the Indian government wants to say is either available on your portal or is sent to you by email. Actually, both is done. Now, you have to make sure that this is attended to properly, because one slip and there's going to be a problem. Now, this is a time also when Indian government is very, it has a benevolent attitude towards releasing any tax refund. So if you have any pending tax refunds in the name of the individuals, or you have pending, provident fund refunds, and you qualify for refunds because you qualify under the Social Security Agreement between India and France, make a claim. The timing is just appropriate. You are bang on. You will get your money very quickly. Now, as I said, I've already referred to in my talk about what could happen, or that you should take cognizance of the tax laws in France, because there can be a conflict. Now, this conflict you should be addressing this conflict, because you should not end up in a situation of double taxation or no taxation. So very important to understand the corresponding tax laws in your home country when you go back there. Last but not the least, this is the most critical amongst the issues that we have discussed, all the miscellaneous issues that we have discussed. Anything that you do or you have done starting April or starting, let's say, March 25th, since the time the lockdown happened, you must maintain a very detailed log of events. Not only will this help you as an individual, this is going to help your company to a great, great extent. And the relevance of this, you will only understand when the tax officer, when the tax man comes and knocks your door, both on the company side and on the individual side. With this, I think I've covered all my points. And can I hand it over back to you, Rishika, Arushi?
Thank you, Sunil, for sharing some insightful views with us. Now we will move on to the question answers round. And we have a first question from Miss Elisa Ketty. And she asked, a French national lives in India for many years now and is a resident from a fiscal point of view in India for tax liability. The French
Right.
assignee works for an Indian company in India on an Indian employment contract, and TDS is also deducted every month. Now, due
Right.
to COVID, the assignee and his family has repatriated to France. The
Right.
assignee works remotely from France for the Indian company and is still paid by the Indian company, who still deducts TDS. So the
Right.
question is, if they cross more than 6 months in France, do they still need to pay TDS in India or start paying income tax in France?
I think I addressed some part of this query, but it's an interesting question, because there are many situations like this. But the rule here is, as long as your salary comes from the account of the Indian company, directly or indirectly, you must pay tax in India. So the TDS must continue, if that is the final question.
Okay, great. So the next question is, should we take an NOC from the employee who has gone back to France? It's an exit case.
An employee that has gone back to France, typically, as I said, when the domicile is being moved on a permanent basis, only when that is the time when you actually are obliged to apply for an income tax clearance certificate. So if in this situation, we are talking about a case where the employment had terminated or concluded, then yes, I would advise to keep the record straight. You must go back to the Indian tax authorities and apply for a post-departure ITCC. Now, and I told you it could have many benefits. One is your records will be streamlined. Secondly, if you ever want to come back to India, that's going to help you. Thirdly, if you belong to a large corporate, corporates obviously have more accountability than just the individuals. Obviously, when you don't deal with one case in a proper manner, the other cases also get impacted. There are questions raised and there are doubts casted on the corporate. So one should obviously try and avoid doing that. Does that answer your question?
Yes. I think due to time constraint, we'll take one last question. And the question is, will the tax credits be available to the individual in case of double taxation in India and France?
Right. Okay, that's an interesting one and a bit tricky. Now, as I said, I mentioned the OECD rules. I don't know how India adapts the OECD rules and eventually what comes into play. But let's say in a non-COVID scenario, simple vanilla non-COVID scenario, if there is an event of double taxation, right, the country which has the first right of taxing you, primarily, normally the resident country, has the ability to give you tax credits. Now, wherever there is a confusion as to which country is going to give you tax credit, it is the resident country that will give you the tax credit. Now, in the COVID scenario, we could have some very absurd situation whereby, OECD-based countries might say that as per OECD rules, this income should not have been taxed in India at the in the first case itself. And if that happens, they might just deny any claims of credit. But it could take any particular shape. But yes, India has signed a tax treaty with France, and therefore the issue of tax credits is very much alive. Let's see what direction it takes and at what stage.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you for taking up these questions and also for a very comprehensive presentation that you shared with all of us. Highlighting on how different concerns relating to personal tax and corporate tax in the scenario of exit from India, extended stay in India can be addressed. I think it was quite insightful, and all the participants must have found this useful. With this, I would now like to close the session and thank you and ASN Associates for associating with us for this important event.
Thank you so much.